This will be a video for 7th grade. In this one, it's going to be a preview, a pre-teach for Module 5 with percents. I want to review some stuff from 6th grade about percents, fractions, and decimals. So for this assignment, you're going to need to get a piece of paper, maybe open up a notebook. What you're going to submit isn't going to be a picture of your math book. It's going to be a picture of just a sheet of paper. And I'd like you to just follow along and pretty much copy everything that we complete on this. So we're going to have 3 different pages here, 3 different things. This will be the first one. We're just going to be writing on this one. We're going to write fractions, percents, and decimals. And these are all going to be equal to each other. So like 1%, we're going to write it as a fraction. We're going to write it as a decimal. We do have a mountain math question that's very similar to this. So it should be familiar to many of you. But to start us off, we're going to go ahead and do this first row for 1%. 1% written as a fraction and written as a decimal is what we need to do. So 1%, I just want to tell you right now, percent means out of, and a 100. Cent means 100. So per means out of, cent means 100. We've seen the word cent in centipede, centimeter. There's 100 cents in a dollar. So when we say the number 1%, that means 1 out of 100. And to write the number, the fraction 1 out of 100, well, it just looks like that, 1 out of 100. So that is the fraction form for 1%. And as a decimal, I can state this as 1/100ths. Well, as a decimal, that just means I'm in the 100ths place, and there's a 1 there, 0.01. Okay, so 1 in the 100ths place. That's our hundredths place right here, where that 1 is. The next one, we have 1/10 in the fraction form. We need to write that as a percent and a decimal. We can we can recognize the word. Remember, percent means out of 100. Our denominator is 100. So what we need to do is we need to convert this fraction so that our denominator is 100. And we're just making an equivalent fraction here. We're going to take whatever this number is, we're going to multiply it by 10 to make it 100. So in this case, we have times 10. We're going to do times 10 to the numerator. We have 10/100ths, or 10 out of 100, or 10%. Or in the 100ths place, we need the number 10. Okay, so the number 10 fits with our hundredths place being the far right. For the next one, we're going to solve it very similarly. We're going to do it the same way, 100. And we need to find out, what is 1/4 as a percent? Well, what do we multiply by 4 to make 100? That would be 4 times 25 times 25. So we have 25%, 25/100ths. So it'll be, again, 0.25, and it'll be 25%. Once you get this hundredths fraction form, well, this is just copy what you had on the top. Over here is just move that decimal over 2 times and make it 25%. The next one is 0.5, and I'm going to write it, well, this place right here is our tenths place. So this is 5/10ths. I'm going to write that here as a fraction, 5/10ths. And we'll just make this equal to hundredths again. 10 times 10, 5 times 10 will be 50. So again, all we need to do is look at this place here. On this one, it was the tenths place. This here was the hundredths. So this is 25/100ths. Here we're 5 in the tenths place, so it's 5/10ths. Convert it to hundredths by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 10. We get 50/100ths, and 50/100ths is therefore 50%. And you probably knew that 50% means half, and this is a half over here. And 5/10 could be even reduced all the way to a half by dividing by 5 divided by 5. This is a half. And actually, I want us to write it like that because that is our simplest form of this decimal, of this percent. So make sure we have a half in this row. 75%, well, let's set that up at 75/100ths. We can reduce this fraction, and we're going to do that. For fractions, I want us in simplest form. This is simplest form, this is simplest form, this is simplest form, this is simplest form. So we're going to need simplest form. I can divide these by, I could divide by 5 because there's a 5 and a 0. I know that. But I'm going to choose to do a larger number. I'm going to divide by 25 because when I think of money in quarters, I know that this is 3 quarters and this is 4 quarters. So I can divide those by 25, and it's going to be 3/4. And that's simplest form there. And as a decimal, here it is going to be 0.75. There is a nice pattern going on from our percent to decimals as well, if you've maybe noticed it. I think I mentioned it earlier. 25%, to write this as a decimal, we just put the decimal on the left side. We move our decimal over 2 times. We move our decimal over 2 times. We move our decimal over 2 times. This is 0.1. This is 0.25. You don't have to write all these things. But I'm just pointing out this pattern because percent means out of 100 means divide by 100. And when you divide anything by 100, you move your decimal point 2 places to the left. The next one, our decimal form is the number 1. So as a fraction, this is 1/1, 1 whole. And we need to convert this to 100ths. So it'll be 100 100ths because we did times 100 times 100. So 100 100ths. As a fraction, simplest form, it is just the number 1. And then what percent is this? Out of 100, we had 100%. So that's the first part. I wanted to show us how percents, fractions, and decimals are related. For the next part, we're going to solve a couple problems. We need to write these fractions as a percent. So let's see. The first one, as a percent, wait, won't this go away? There it goes. All right, as a percent, let's make it 100ths. So 100ths, this was 50 times 2 makes 100. So what's 13 times 2? That's 26. So our percent for the first one will be 26%. The next one, we want to find out what is this in hundreds. 5 times what is 100? Well, you could divide this. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So we'll do times 20 times 20. So 3 times 20 is 60. This is 60%. The next one, I want to set this up as a proportion, and I want to solve it as like this as a proportion. You've probably done this before. I know that Mr. Mama probably teaches you how to solve proportions like this by multiplying these and multiplying these and setting them up equal to each other. So we have 3 times 100 on one side equals 20 times x. 3 times 100 is 300 equals 20x. And our last step, this is multiplication. We want to solve for this x. What times 20 equals 300? So we would have to divide by 20. Divide by 20. I can reduce these by 10 right away. 30 divided by 2, x equals 15%. And we could have also just done times 5 times 5. There's millions of ways we can do these. We could also just do 3 divided by 20, and that would give us 0.15. And remember, 0.15, if that's our decimal, well, we just have to multiply that by 100. That's going to be 15%. Next, 7/5. Let's go ahead. Let's set it up. X over 100. What percent is this? So we've got 5x equals 700. Divide by 5. Divide by 5. That 5x was here and 700 is here. So now you can just grab a calculator, do 700 divided by 5, or 700 divided by 5, that'd be 1. 5, subtract 2, bring down a 0. 4, 20, 0, bring down our last 0. So that'd be 140%. That's what x equals, 140%. Well, x equals 140, but our answer here is 140%. We can also just divide 7 divided by 5, and that'll give you 1.4, which then we know is 140% when you move your decimal 1, 2 times over and add your 0. We could also have just done times 20 times 20. 1/8. This one we're going to do 1/8. So making this 100ths. 8 doesn't really work with 100. 8 works with 40, and it works with 80 and 120, but it doesn't work with 100, so I can't do it this method. Well, I mean, I could, but it used decimals or fractions. But I want to do, I'll do it this way. So we'll say 8x equals 100. To solve this, I just divide by 8, divide by 8. So we've got to do 100 divided by 8. 8's in 1, can't do it. 8's in 10 is 1. That'll be 8, subtract, that's 2, bring down my 0. 8's in 20 is going to be 2, that'll be 16. Subtract, that's 4. Bring down another 0 and put a decimal there. That's 40. 8's in 40 is 5, and that's going to come out even done. So we get 12.5. And that's what x is. So x equals 12.5. So it'll be 12.5%. That's what 1/8 is. The next one we can pretty easily say, well, this is times 4. So we'll do times 4 here. 23 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. That'll be 8 plus 1 is 9. So this will be 92%. 12.5%, 15%, 140%, 60%, and 26%. That was just taking these fractions and writing them as percents. We're going to have one more set of problems, and these are just problem-solving questions. So the first one, we need to find out what 15% of 9 is. When I see the word of, that tells me, I'm going to solve these a couple different ways, but the word of, if you ever see the word of, that means multiply. So one thing we can do is we can do 15% times 9. Or instead of saying percent, we could call this 15 100ths times 9. Or we can say 0.15 times 9. So 0.15 times 9, we can just solve that. Getting a phone call. 5 times 9 is 45. 9 plus 4 is 13. Move my decimal over 2 times, and we're right there. So 15, 45, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Move my decimal 2 times. We get 1.35. So 15% of 9 is 1.35. We could also have said 15 100ths equals what part of 9? And you do 15 times 9, which would give us, let's see, 15, well, it's 135, right? 15 times 9, we would get 135 equals 100 times x. And then we just divide by 100, divide by 100, and we get 1.35 again. So you can do that in a calculator, or if you know that dividing by 100, you just move your decimal over 2 times, 1.35. For the next one, I'm going to solve it with a proportion like this. So let's see, let me get 10%. So 10 out of 100 So 10% of 63 is what number? Is 63 our whole, or is it the part? If we're going to find out what this part of 63 is, well, that's going to be the whole. So 10% of 63, 10 out of 100 is equal to, so 10 out of 100% is equal to what part of 63? So we'll have 630, that's 10 times 63, equals 100 times x. We're going to divide by 100, divide by 100. We're going to get 6.3. 10% is actually one of the easiest ones you can do because all you have to do is move your decimal over one time. You're going to get 6.3. We could have also done 0.1 or 10. I'll make it 0.1 per 10% here of 63. You can just type that in a calculator. Or you could do 10 100ths times 63. So you have 630 on the top, 100 on the bottom. Just divide them. There that was. So many different ways to solve these problems. Next one, 22 students is what percent of 55 students? So we need to find out what out of 100 is 22 out of 55. So on this one we have our part. Our part is 22. The whole amount of students is 55. So we need to find out what percent is it? What out of 100? So it's going to be 55x equals 2200. It's 22 times 100 is 2200. We would just divide by 55, divide by 55. We get x equals, and we can just type that in to a calculator. 2200 divided by 55 is 40. So it's 40%. 12 is what percent? So what percent is 12 of 200? Wow, those are zeros. 12 of 200. So 12 is what percent of 200? Well, so then we'll just solve a proportion. 12 times 100 is 1200 equals 200x. Divide by 200. Divide by 200. I can divide these by 10. Divide these by 10. 12 divided by 2, 6. Last one. 24 is 40%. 24 out of how much? What's our whole here? 24 out of how many is 40%? So 24 is 40% of what number? So we'll say, here we go, to cross multiply here. We've got 2400 equals 40x. Divide by 40, divide by 40. Well, we can reduce by 10. I know 24 divided by 4 is 6. Add a 0, 60 equals x. So 24, we could say 24 60ths is equal to 40 100ths for this one. 24 is 40% of 60. So when you're doing these problems, we need to set these up as two equivalent fractions. One of the fractions is your percent. So one of our fractions was this 15 100ths. One of our fractions on this one was 10 100ths. Got it right here. One of ours on this one, we don't know the percent yet. The percent on this last one, this bottom one, if they give us the percent, well, there's one of our fractions. The second fraction we need to come up with is our part over our whole. On this one, it was 22 out of 55. There was that one. On this one, it was 12 out of 200, and that was right there. And then I'm going to grab, let's see, how about orange to demonstrate that the ones on this one we got, our part and our whole was 135 over 9. On this one, our part was 6.3 out of 63. On Those are the only two that were like that. Oh, this last one. We had 24 out of 60. 24 out of 60. These are all proportions. These are all equivalent fractions. So on these, sorry that I wrote a lot of stuff, but I want you to show your work. I want you to follow along with what I did. If you need to pause, or if you need to catch up, you can certainly do that. But we solved all 5 of these, and this is going to help us out when we get to section 5-1. Hopefully this was helpful. I do have Google Meets if you need extra help. I know it's been a while since we used percents, but hopefully this was helpful.